Among the treasures was this belt buckle, which has Gott Mat marked the purple. Otto was born on May 11th, 1895, to Nels Gustav Peterson, a teamster, and Anna Louise Anderson Peterson in Ludlow, Pennsylvania. He was the 8th of 11 children. His mother died in 1908, and his father remarried in 1914 to Mary Olson, who became affectionately known as Maud Mary. Grandpa was confirmed in the Swedish Mission Covenant Church in Ludlow. We know that while he was growing up, he was active in athletics, including a long-standing love for baseball. When World War I started in 1914 in Europe, Grandpa was living in Ludlow. The United States managed to keep out of the war until 1917. It is at that time that the call went out for those young enough to enlist in the war. Grandpa, on February 25th, 1918, enlisted at Smethport, Pennsylvania. When he enlisted, he was 23 years of age, and by occupation, a leather worker. He was described as having blue eyes, blonde hair, fair complexion, and being 5 foot 8 1/2 inches in height. After enlistment, Grandpa was sent off to Camp Lee, Virginia, pictures is, why did the Americans ever enter into the war? Where did Grandpa play a part in it? And where? Hopefully we'll answer these in the video.
McCullough. The lamps are going out all over Europe, said the British Foreign Minister, Lord Grey. We shall not see them lit again in our lifetime. It was August 1914, the eve of the Great War, as it was called. The war that was supposed to end all wars. The slaughter was appalling, unimaginable, year after year. We vowed to keep out, but that proved impossible. The Yanks are coming over there, we sang in 1917. I felt I was Galahad after the Grail, remembered Captain Harry Truman of Missouri. They mostly all felt that way as they sailed for France to make the world safe for democracy. From World War I came a whole new vocabulary: buck private, brass hat, dog tag, chow line, red tape, shell shock, and basket case. A basket case was a quadruple amputee. The new modern tools of slaughter included the flamethrower, the machine gun, the hand grenade, the tank, the airplane, and poison gas. Yet it was also a war in which hay supplies were vital for the tens of thousands of horses used. It was where the 19th and the 20th centuries parted ways forever. Imagine in the frenzy of battle trying to put a gas mask on a horse. No larger American army had ever been seen than the one that moved to the front for the Meuse-Argonne offensive that dramatically figures in tonight's film, The Great War of 1918. American casualties exceeded 120,000. More Americans were killed in battle in a year and a half than were killed in Vietnam in 9 years.
18 million people died in World War I. It was a war with ancient causes. Europe's empires fought to settle old scores and conquer new lands. Germany and her allies lined up against England, France, and Russia. The United States stayed out of the war for almost 3 years, but in the end, Americans came to fight on French battlefields.
Europe stood on the brink of a promising future. European empires spanned the globe. Europe's monarchs encouraged fierce nationalism, but enjoyed cordial relations, tied to each other by blood and marriage. Tsar Nicholas of Russia was the King of England's first cousin. The Emperor of Germany was Queen Victoria's grandson, and shared the King of England's carriage on many occasions. The monarchs shared a pan-European inheritance, an awareness of a common civilization. But beneath the surface boiled old rivalries, fears, and dreams of empire. Europe was far from united. Britain and France were the dominant imperial powers, and Germany and Italy were eager to overtake them. The rest of Europe was a tangle of quarrels and national jealousies. Germany was the success story of modern Europe. Its population doubled between 1870 and 1914, and by 1914 it produced more iron and steel than the rest of Europe. Germany felt it was justified in flexing its muscles and reaching out for empire, and it rearmed mightily between 1889 and 1914. By 1914, it had a formidable army, 15 times the size of Britain's, and the most powerful artillery in Europe. By 1912, the Germans had 20 modern battleships, an alarming number compared with the dominant naval power, Britain, which had 30 dreadnoughts in European waters.
In the small Slavic kingdom of Serbia in the Balkans, June 28th is a holiday, festive, patriotic, lively with the spirit of Slav nationalism. Across the border from Serbia is Bosnia, also inhabited by Slavs, but occupied by the alien empire of Austria-Hungary. This is the provincial capital, Sarajevo, June 28, 1914. The distinguished visitor in the plumed hat is Archduke Franz Ferdinand, nephew and heir to the Emperor of Austria-Hungary. The Archduke's wife, Sophia, is with him. Minutes before, a bomb was thrown at their car. At the city hall, they report the ugly incident. From here, they will drive on into the path of calamity. A street where a boy stands armed with a pistol. Two shots end the lives of the Archduke and his wife. The assassin is a tubercular high school student named Gavrilo Princip, a Slav patriot inspired and armed by a Serbian agent. Sarajevo is ransacked by Austrian occupation troops, while the bodies of the victims are shipped home to Vienna. The funeral barely interrupts the music in the cabarets. But behind the scenes, tragedy is being turned into opportunity by Austria's foreign minister, Count Leopold von Berchtold, and the military chief, General Franz Conrad von Hötzendorf. From the German Kaiser, Austria's ally, they get assurances of support for any measures they may take to punish what he calls this detestable crime. After handing over this blank check, the Kaiser allows himself to be hustled off on his usual summer cruise by his Chancellor Theobald von Bethmann-Hollweg. Everything will be taken care of. There is no reason to change plans.
At sea, England's George V presided over the mobilization of the British fleet. Britain's allies, France and Russia, were bound by treaties ironically designed to keep any power from becoming too great. They also mobilized against Germany and her ally, Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, and when the great powers honored their treaty obligations and paper commitments, the inconceivable happened. What began as a local conflict exploded into World War.
World War War I is in its third year. The exhausted armies of France and England grimly battle the Germans in a deadlocked combat. Allied troops are drained of the will to fight, and so they hold the line, protecting Paris and the English Channel.
In 1916, we had been emphatically against the war. President Woodrow Wilson was hailed as a tough idealist, re-elected as the man who had kept us out of Europe's madness. In his speeches, he drew a vision of a world without war, created through American diplomacy. We would be the peacemakers. But as Wilson spoke of peace, our country became rich on wartime trade. American food was sold to feed England and France. American steel was sold to supply their factories. Finally, in January 1917, the German Navy moved to cut the Allies' supply lines. On February 3rd, Wilson broke off diplomatic ties with Germany. The first American vessel was sunk a few days later. In March, 3 more of our ships went down. On April 2nd, 1917, the President went to Congress to ask for war. He said on that day, "It is a fearful thing to lead this great peaceful people into war, civilization itself seeming to be in the balance." Like many, Wilson believed that this was the war to end all wars. If we helped to win it, we would be in a strong position to influence a lasting peace. War, we had a standing army of only 130,000 men. We needed to draft and recruit 4 million. Dorothy Fruchs recruited for the Navy.
In those days, we had no television, we had no radio, we had no means of communication. What we had to do is to go to get the recruits where the boys were. Where were they? They were at the theaters, the moving picture houses. And when I got up on the platform and spoke to the men, I must have touched them some way. And we always had a Fifth Avenue bus outside the theater. And the bus took these men and brought them right to the Navy Yard and recruited them. And I don't think their employers knew what happened to them.
I enlisted on April 3rd, 1917. And of course, they asked me how old I was, and I said I was 18, and so nobody questioned it. I was on my own anyway. Officer who took us out on the bivouac, and he said, "Now, you boys are so young, you probably don't realize what this is all about." But he says, "I'm going to talk to you like a father to a son and tell you that we are at war. And that war means you have an enemy. And the enemy is going to destroy you, or if you want to live, then you must destroy the enemy."
Grandpa enlisted at Smethport, Pennsylvania on February 26, 1918. He reported to Camp Lee, Virginia, where he was a member of the 155th Depot Brigade. He was at Camp Lee, Virginia from February 27th, 1918 through April 1st, 1918. Grandpa was sent to Camp Hancock, Georgia, where he became a member of the 110th Infantry Machine Gun Company. It was here that he received his principal training for war. U.S. Infantry 110th is what the button shows on this picture. At Camp Hancock, Georgia, the 110th Infantry, this is where they were bivouacked. The training Grandpa had to go through at Camp Hancock. Grandpa was at Camp Hancock for a little more than 25 days when the orders came to move to France. From Camp Hancock, Georgia, they traveled to Camp Merritt, New Jersey, via Richmond, Washington, Philadelphia, and New York. While passing through Washington, Grandpa told us that the troops were reviewed by President Wilson. While in Philadelphia, the 110th Infantry Machine Gun Company stopped to pose for a picture. Number 95 is Grandpa. On May 2nd, 1918, the regiment moved from Camp Merritt to Hoboken, New Jersey, where it embarked by ships supplied by the British government. It is believed that Grandpa crossed on the SS Corsican. It landed in Liverpool, England, around May 17th, 1918. The ships would travel across the sea in convoys so as to avoid German U-boats. Grandpa went to Calais, France on May 20th, 1918. Here's the camp where they trained in Calais. You can see where they traveled across the English Channel to Calais, and on June 4th they marched from Calais down to Hesdin, and there they continued their training.
All those who had spare time on their hands were expected to do their bit for victory. Sweaters were knitted for all the boys who would be going over there. The first American troops were ready to go to Europe by June of 17.
Johnny, get your gun, get your gun, get your gun. Take it on the run, on the run, on the run. Hear them calling you and me, everyone for liberty.
Pershing's Crusaders is how they were described in one propaganda film. Modern knights crusading for a new world.
Proud our boys in line. Over there, send the word over there, that the Yanks are coming, the Yanks.
Last letters posted on this side of the Atlantic read, "Dear folks, I am doing the world's work, and I am in it to the finish for God, for liberty, for honor."
Send the word over there, that the Sammies are coming, the Sammies are coming, the drums coming everywhere. So prepare.
Many, many years later, a man who lived through it wrote this: "We were not hypocrites, only innocent. We went to war like sleepwalkers, muttering incantations." Dear folks, I am leaving today for the great adventure. Every American hull that could float was used to bring men across the sea. They traveled in convoys, cutting zigzag patterns to evade the German U-boats. Destroyers laid down smoke screens. On the way over, a young lieutenant wrote his sweetheart. He would become president of the United States.
American troops arriving in France bring new life, new spirit to a shattered continent. The mere sight of these fresh new troops gives the French people renewed hope. While General Pershing buys time at the conference table, his men train in the fields. Doughboys by the thousands are exposed to the tactics of trench war. They are taught to defend themselves against the silent threat of poison gas. They must become experts with the new weapons of World War I. During the training, Pershing seems to be everywhere at once, snapping out orders, correcting faults, demanding perfection. They call him Blackjack, a driving taskmaster, constantly setting higher and higher standards. 1918, the greatest crisis of World War I begins. The German army has launched the spring offensive along a 40-mile front. 200 German divisions move forward under cover of a massive artillery barrage. The Allied front cracks, and the Germans sweep for Paris. Pershing offers a few American units to help stem the tide. They fight under the command of British and French officers. Cantigny, Belleau Wood, Chateau Thierry.
Chateau Thierry, along the flaming Marne. On the Marne in mid-July 1918, the threat to the Allies reaches its high-water mark. But now, after 4 years of deadlock and this long season of peril, the tide of war will finally turn.
June 24th, they left Hesdin and marched southeasterly towards the front, which is the battle line where World War I was being engaged. And at the time, the action occurred in the Marne River. And from there, they traveled through Chateau Thierry. At the Chateau Thierry on July 26th, 1918. And 2 days later would be at a very pivotal engagement on the Ourcq River near the small town of Corma, France.
Time, Americans helped to hold the line. They did much to sustain the morale of the battle-worn French and English. Finally, in midsummer, the German offensive petered out. It seemed that for the moment, the enemy's available reserves had simply been exhausted.
In that Chateau Thierry drive, the Germans was piled up on top of each other like cordwood, where we'd killed them. So when we got there, it was July, and it was stunk so that you couldn't hardly stand it. So they just dug a ditch alongside and dumped them over and put quicklime on them and got rid of them. So, but the Germans stood behind their own men and fired.
Chateau Thierry, here he come on the train, Garest.
Chateau Thierry. A little panorama of this very historic and old town, Castle Thierry. The Chateau Thierry is named Castle is Chateau. Thierry was the guy who owned it. This is the Marne River we're looking at now. We're looking east. It's a very famous and old cathedral. And there in the background is the American monument. So we'll focus on that a little bit more. Woods. One of the woods battles monumented here. 28th Division. Marne Salient. First time I ever noticed that. Specifically, what Grandpa was about is on July 18th, the Allied forces began a general counter-offensive against the whole salient, which the 28th Division served under. The Americans' corps took a brilliant part in the offensive. It was completely successful. And by August 6th, the enemy had been driven beyond the valley. Of the 310,000 American soldiers who fought in these operations, 67,000 were casualties. Otto was one of them. Map. There's the reference to the 28th Division in Grimpets Woods. The York River.
Toward Amiens in the British sector, the other along the Marne. To chop at the hinge of the two salients near Soissons. There will be no more waiting. Now, while the Marne battle still rages, Foch decides to move. He has two new assets. Tanks now available by the hundreds, and Americans. The story in the making is the build-up for Soissons. The French 10th Army, with its French, colonial, and American divisions, its 350 tanks, supply wagons, water wagons, rolling kitchen. This day, this battle, July 18th at Soissons, is the war's great pivot. The British proclaim it Victory Day, although it is Americans and French who win the field, pushing the Germans back. The French, regaining their lost spirit of élan. The Americans with their brash, whooping charges, like a deadly game of cowboys and Indians, dislodging the war from its doldrums and losing half their combat strength in 3 days. As the Germans fall back to avoid being trapped in their salient, the Allies press in. More Yank divisions drive into the salient, the 3rd, 4th, 26th, the 32nd, and 42nd, planting new bridgeheads across the Marne and the rivers beyond it, the Aisne and the Vesle. French General Mangin salutes them in an order of the day. I am thankful to you for the blood so generously spilled. A German officer writes, I do not believe we shall ever get our hands free again. The American army is there. That is too much. In 3 weeks, the Marne salient is liberated, and the Allied tide is still rolling. Foch signals the end of defense, the shift to attack. Everyone into the battle.
Came in this way, and what they did on July 27th and 28th, they came here to an area called Forma, their division. And what they were supposed to do, they were moving the Germans back towards Germany. And what happened, the Germans held up right here. See, this is a wooded area. And the Germans put a bunch of machine gun nests in here. And Grandpa's group was to take out the Germans here. And this is where the battle occurred, Griffith Woods. That's right.
Verdun was the worst fight.
That's right. So what happened with Grandpa right here, in July 29th, was gassed. It was taken to a hospital. The hospital they sent to Dijon. Dijon is where he went for his hospital. And Dijon is at, where would that be, Claude? Dijon? Dijon?
Dijon is
what they did was they got gassed. They went to Les Charmel. That's where. Then from there he went to Dijon. Direction 18 kilometers. There's Coma.
And here are the two trees that I talk about.
Here we are in Cormont, where Claude has stopped by the spot where the two trees, we believe, are in the picture. And Claude, he knows where everything is. This lady remembers this, and Claude was telling us that this is where he took the pictures of the two trees, that this is in fact confirmed.
Mon beau-frère. Et ils les ont emmenés à Orly, pour les emmener en Amérique.
C'est votre beau-frère qui a...
C'est mon beau-frère, oui.
Qui les a démontés?
Il est marié avec ma sœur, oui. Donc c'est lui, oui. J'ai démonté les grilles, moi.
This man is the brother-in-law.
Alors lui, il est plus âgé.
Of the woman, and he take these pieces out, and the big truck came and bring these pieces of iron.
C'est pour ça là, moi j'ai pas connu la maison.
Airport.
J'ai pas connu la maison, mais les grilles, je les
United States.
Les grilles.
Did he sign in front?
En Pennsylvanie.
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
Yes. Pennsylvania.
Good.
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh.
Oui, oui. La division était formée de 3 régiments d'infanterie, le 110e, le 109e et le 111e.
You heard what he said? The division was with 3 regiments of infantry.
Infantry?
110. Le 110e, le combien?
109, 110 et 111.
Ah, les grilles là.
Oui, mais merci, j'ai connu, je connais tout ça par cœur. Et là-dessus, il y a...
He said, I know, we're waiting of this by 18.
Par le 156e régiment d'infanterie français.
By 156 regiment infantry French.
Voilà. Ce qui correspond complètement détruite, rasée. Hein. Probablement un dépôt de munitions qui était à l'intérieur et qui aura sauté.
He said in this church it was munition, you know, bomb and comment, je sais pas comment on dit. You know munition?
Munition, sure.
Yes. And they said maybe in the inside of the church there was bomb and everything and munition, and when they throw bomb on this church, everything was finished.
Oof.
Yes. French regiment.
Yes.
They take it out, and after the 110 regiment of Pennsylvania came in Cormont.
Bon. Alors, venant de Le Charmel, si vous voulez.
They came from Le Charmel by the wood.
Voilà. Le 110e infanterie.
The 110 Pennsylvania
Tardenois.
Came in Fresnes en Tardenois.
Et est venu s'installer dans le bois de la Garenne.
They stay in the wood of La Garenne.
Hein? Et puis,
La Garenne wood.
Voilà. Le 26. Et il y a une anecdote qui est assez marrante, c'est que est-ce que les Français...
Story when the French goes out from Cormont, the American people they came, and the French soldier said to the American, the Oak River was 20 meters large, and the American they were looking after a river, you know, large, and they didn't find this, and it was only a small river.
C'est bien que la patrouille...
And here go inside the German line, you know, because they were looking after the river, they don't find, and they were going in front, and the German was there, and they just the limit, you know, to be killed by the German people.
Alors, à la...
627, the American people, they went in Grampet Wood, and they thought there was not many German people, soldiers, and there was plenty German, and they didn't know this, and they killed many American people, 250 in the night, and it was very bad.
Ça fait massacrer, bah oui.
Il faudrait qu'on aille plus loin pour que je lui montre les endroits. Non, mais même à pied, là. On ira, je voudrais vous montrer autre chose après. Tiens, viens, puis je vais leur lui montrer, viens, le bois des grains. Mais malgré tout, pas beaucoup de couverts.
But there was not much wood in the, you know.
C'est cette partie-là.
This is Grampet Wood.
Grampet Wood, c'est là. Bon. Alors, ça devait être un régiment de mitrailleurs allemands. J'ai jamais pu savoir quel était son numéro. Ils tenaient le bois des grimpettes et ils les ont laissés approcher comme des gamins. Tout à fait, et surtout sur la partie
découverte.
Sur la partie gauche là.
They said, attendez que je lui dise en même temps. They wait for American soldiers to go over there, you know. The German soldiers, they were staying and waiting. And when they came on the left, a little bit on the left, they shoot all of them. Second,
voilà.
You know,
et là, ils avaient
floor,
encore un petit abri.
and they wait over there.
Et là, ils avaient encore un petit abri.
Fork River. This will go out.
Là, tu vas à la flotte.
Which the French had told the Americans was about 20 meters wide. You can see when they came down here, they were confused. And what happened was they crossed it, and they were looking for a bigger river, and they kept getting closer and closer to the Germans, right? And all of a sudden, the Germans were right there.
Ça leur faisait loin, hein, puisqu'ils étaient dans le village.
He said it was very far for them to come from the village until the German people and not any trees around. Then the German they wait for them and they kill them like rabbits, you know.
Ma mère me disait que comme les récoltes étaient restées, alors on voyait comme les hommes étaient montés en ligne, on voyait les colonnes à travers les marches, à travers les récoltes.
The grass was very high and they could see the way where the soldiers were going by line, you know, in the inside of the grass.
C'était très dur pour monter là-haut. Hein. D'ailleurs, dans le livre du 110e qui est chez le superintendant, il mettait que la colline était à peu près dénudée. Évidemment, c'était... Les autres les ont laissés approcher. À mon point de vue, ils ne se sont pas figurés qu'ils devaient avoir une résistance. Et puis, au lieu d'avoir lancé quelques patrouilles qui auraient fait patrouille de charge, des éclaireurs...
The Marne River was the scene of a lot of action. Here's a picture of the 110th Infantry crossing the Marne River to Chateau Thierry. The panorama of Chateau Thierry, stone bridge across the Marne, which was damaged by the Germans retreating across the Marne River. Through July 30th, 1918, Grandpa's 110th Infantry was involved in the battle near Cormont, France, across the Ourcq River. Picture of the little village in Cormont. Of the first aid station in Cormont, where Grandpa probably was brought after his injury as a result of mustard gas. The Ourcq River dealt with a strategic point on a hill called Grimpett's Hill. Here's just a small side view of it.
French artillery, you know, artillery, they came and they destroy all the German people, and they are still over there. They don't make sepulture, not anything. Not cemetery, they are still maybe inside of this.
Et le
le 30 juillet, le bois des grimpettes tombait.
And in the 30 of July, the Grampet wood was falling down.
Les Boches étaient faits prisonniers.
Not any German people fighting, prisoner and dead and everything.
But you tell him my grandfather was gassed on the 29th of July, 1918.
He was?
La prise a été le 30, et parce qu'il y a entre le 27, 28, 29, et puis et gazé devant les grimpettes.
In Grampet wood?
Grampet wood,
yes.
C'est possible, parce que l'artillerie allemande était donc derrière Sierre, hein, les pièces d'artillerie de campagne. On va voir parce que le service sanitaire américain faisait les analyses des points d'eau parce que les Allemands risquaient de les empoisonner et il n'y avait aucune confiance aux soldats allemands.
His mother said that for the ambulance, you know, small cars, they came from the battle and they go to the over there. This is a washing place, you know, to wash the clothes. And they were looking after this because the German soldier they put something in the water to, you know, to hurt the American people, you know, to.
Alors, les Américains avaient donc bien capté la source. Ils avaient fait une espèce de fils de Theodore Roosevelt. Hein.
The son of Theodore Roosevelt fell just in the back in this wood in 1918. En 1918.
Lui, son frère a été tué en 1944 sur les plages de débarquement de Normandie.
River Valley area. When he was wounded in action on July 29, 1918. In fact, the local Kane, Pennsylvania newspaper reported he was missing in action.
Right where the Germans first came over and poured poison gas on troops, because we were in trenches where we could see the marks in the walls of the trench where those poor soldiers tried to bury their heads in the earth to escape it. Of course, there was no escape.
More than 30% of all casualties were caused by poison gas. Both sides used it. In the first week of the Meuse-Argonne attack, the American lines were heavily saturated. Though everyone had a gas mask, there had been little training in the identification and detection of types of gas.
I went down into where the gas was, and the gas was about 3 feet all over the ground, real yellow. And I had my mask on. I knowed what to do. So I drove in there, but I had to turn around down in there so I could load my patients to go to him back out. And there wasn't one of those fellas had a gas mask on down in there. Not one. And that mask was there, and the lieutenant says, "Oh, it's mild." He says, "That won't hurt you. Get that." He swore. Made me take mine off. So I goes to work, and I said, I took his mask off. Then I went back in 3 or 4 more times, and then I landed in the hospital.
There were 3 kinds of gas. Phosgene gas produced asphyxiation by causing fluid to enter the lungs. Poisons like diphenylchloridazine cause sneezing, nausea, and vomiting. Blister agents or mustard gas cause the most casualties. Severe burns, blisters, and blindness resulted.
One of the American troops had to go places, and he went into this shell hole. It was pretty deep. And he squatted down. And he squatted down into mustard gas. And mustard gas attacks any place where there's perspiration, under the arms and around the privates and stuff, you know, in between the legs. It attacks that very much, where there's a little moisture. And he clawed himself to death. He was dead. I mean, it was the most revolting experience that I think I ever went through in my life, to see that poor guy down there, the way he had torn himself to pieces. And the more he tore, the worse it got.
The mustard gas, as were many, many, many Army men during World War I. Out of the mustard gas, Grandpa was transferred to a hospital near Alais, France. It was entitled Base Hospital Number 25. They go to the railroad station for transfer to the base hospital.
Faced with caring for the wounded on an unprecedented scale.
During the Argonne, we evacuated twice at night and twice in the daytime. There was so many thousands of them coming in. We cleaned them up, deloused them, and gave them their baths, and then they put on their flannel pajamas, and all they wanted to do was sleep. The wards were so quiet, there was hardly a sound. They just slept when they came in. It was hard that so many of them would die by the time they had gotten that far. And we didn't talk about that very much. We would try to be more jovial.
You got to remember, this is way back in 1917. There were no sulfa drugs, no penicillin, and all we had at the front line was to have a pad, piece of muslin probably 3 feet long, and a compress pad right in the center. And when the man was bleeding, we would just wrap it around his arm or legs or body and tie it.
After being gassed, it was unclear in the confusion of the war what happened to Grandpa. On August 21st, 1918, a letter was sent to his brother David in Ludlow, Pennsylvania, which said, "We deeply regret to inform you that Private Otto A. Peterson, Infantry, is officially reported as missing in action July 30th. Will report first information received." This obviously created a great deal of anxiety among the family members. It was reported in the Kane paper as follows: Hun line crumbles. Ludlow man of 110th is missing. Official report concerning Otto A. Peterson. For the 4 children in service, the official article says that Otto A. Peterson Machine Gun Company was missing in action July 30th, and that was received from the Adjutant General by Otto's father, August Peterson of Ludlow. No details were known except the official notice. The article goes on to state that Private Peterson was one of a contingent of men from Camp Lee transferred to the 110th Regiment of Camp Hancock. The old Fighting 10th received the heaviest casualties of any of the Pennsylvania divisions in the Marne campaign, and it is believed that Peterson may be among the men taken prisoner. Peterson was popular in Ludlow, and the community is hopeful of a favorable report. Further goes on to state that Otto A. Peterson is one of 4 members of the family of August Peterson in service. Oscar Peterson is a brother. Sister Hannah Peterson is in the Red Cross. Was at Camp Lee. The war ended November 11th, 1918, yet the family did not know the fate of Otto. Here is a communique of November 30th, 1918, to David again.
which indicated that Private Otto A. Peterson, infantry, who reported missing in action since July 30th, is now reported wounded, degree undetermined. You can see the communications during that period were less than adequate. An awful long time had lapsed, but you can imagine the relief when the family received this word. July 30th, 1918, when he was transferred back to the Thiaucourt sector. Here's just a brief map. Until armistice was signed November 11th, 1918 at 11 a.m.
On November 11th, 1918, the Doughboys received word that the war to end all wars is over.
On November 11th, 1918, Grandpa was in the Thiaucourt sector on his way to Metz, Germany. This is where he stayed and was in the last battles of the war at St. Quentin. The records then indicate that he remained in France after the war as a member of the 109th Infantry Reclamation Unit. Subsequently, he was transferred to the 110th Infantry 28th Division Reclamation Unit, which was located at Bary-la-Côte, France. From there, Grandpa was stationed in various spots of France and ultimately ended up in Belgium. He was stationed in Antwerp. And from Antwerp, he was transferred to Brest, France, where he returned to the United States on October 29th, 1919. He was honorably discharged on September 5th, 1919. Honorable discharge from the United States Army. This document was filed in the McKean County Clerk's office. He was filed from Camp Dix on September 5th, 1919. On November 27th, 1919, the Hamilton Township, of which Ludlow was a part, welcomed home their men who were served in World War I. Here's a picture of Grandpa Peterson. Grandpa became a charter member of the American Legion that was created in 1920 in Ludlow and was its first chaplain. Applied for and received a Victory Medal as a private in the 110th Machine Gun Company for action in the Aisne front. His final reward on February 5th, 1945, when the commanding officer of the Army Service Forces directed that a Purple Heart engraved with the name of Otto A. Peterson be issued to him on account of wounds received on July 29th, 1918, while serving as a private in the Machine Gun Company 110th Infantry. Ludlow, a hero. He was given a citation from President Woodrow Wilson, which reads, "To Otto Peterson, 110th Infantry, served with honor in the World War and was wounded in action." Signed, Woodrow Wilson. He was also given the coveted Purple Heart for military merit. Furthermore, his infantry recognized him with a medal referring to his action on the defensive front at the Ain River. Finally, his town, Ludlow, Pennsylvania, decorated him with a medal which reads, "To Otto Peterson, by the people of Ludlow, Pennsylvania, in grateful recognition of patriotic service in World War." A bronze plaque was erected at the gates of Wildcat Park in Ludlow, Pennsylvania, to celebrate these veterans who answered the call of their country. In addition to Otto, his two other brothers, Eric and Oscar, were also in the war and recognized in the plaque. He died at age 69 on July 6, 1964. His obituary read that he was born in Ludlow, Pennsylvania on May 11, 1895, the son of Gustav and Anna Peterson. Married Rachel Carlson on September 29, 1926. She died January 11, 1964. He was confirmed in the Swedish Mission Covenant Church in Ludlow and lived in Jamestown since 1922. It stated he was a veteran of World War I, where he served in the 28th Division of the 110th Machine Gun Company. He received the Purple Heart. He was a member of the Ira Lou Spring Post, the American Legion, and the Earl Morley Barracks World War I veterans. He was a salesman of S.A. Cook Company of Medina, Advanced Furniture Company, Monitor Furniture Company, and Van Stee Furniture Company. He was the president of the Jamestown Wholesale Furniture Salesman Association in 1950. But more importantly, Grandpa was something else. We will remember Grandpa as a loving, sensitive, kind person who was there when you needed him. He was a man who would take his time and take his grandchildren to Ludlow, Pennsylvania. Always one who enjoyed his own family and his family members. He was Mr. Santa Claus at Christmas time. He's the one that brought gifts after gifts after gifts, which Grandma would spend meticulous time wrapping. He's the one that would take the time and bring the monies at Christmas so the kids would sit down and count and we would buy stocks the next day. We have very, very fond memories of our grandfather. We are all blessed with our own memories of him, but now we have a keener appreciation for his willingness to die for the country that he loved and to maintain his heroism with the greatest humility. Thank you, Grandpa, for being you.